Inflating enemies until they explode is classic family-friendly Nintendo. Today we track every enemy we kill in Dig Dug 2. Dig Dug 2's greatness, like so many games, is in its simplicity. The goal? Kill all enemies while avoiding running into them and dying yourself. There are only two types of enemies, Pukas, which run at you, and Figars, which can run and breathe fire. You have two tools for survival, a jackhammer and a pump. The jackhammer lets you exploit fault lines, which in turn allow you to create choke points or completely collapse entire sections of the island, killing anyone, including yourself if you happen to be on the sinking section. The pump is surprisingly versatile. It fires like a spear gun, and if it connects with an enemy, you can mash A to inflate them until they literally explode. But you don't have to fully inflate them. You can use it as a stun gun by blasting an enemy, pumping a little air into them, and then leaving. It takes time for the enemy to deflate and rejoin the chase, and you can even run over the top of partially inflated enemies without taking damage, which is huge. Now, if you know all of this going in, the game can still be challenging, but if you're like me and know nothing other than watching someone play the first couple levels on YouTube, well, you may get frustrated. For the first 30 levels or so, I did not have a good grasp on many of the gameplay basics, and consequently did not have a great time. In particular, I didn't get that enemies can't cross the lines on the ground you create with your jackhammer. Instead, they are forced to walk around or tunnel underneath, which leaves them open to attack with your pump. This may seem extremely obvious to anyone watching, but in the moment, my brain did not comprehend this. Once my brain checked back into my body, I used this knowledge to employ the ugly stepchild of circle camping, rectangle camping. If the level allows, you can utilize your jackhammer to create a rectangular hole and run rectangles around it until an opportunity arises to pick off enemies one by one. Dig Dug 2 has an odd difficulty curve. It starts out with very few enemies and gradually increases to a maximum of 10. But it doesn't increase linearly, and in fact there are often less enemies in later levels. The size of the map and location of fault lines also varies wildly. Larger maps provide more ways to avoid enemies, create choke points, or cut off entire sections of the island, meaning some tiny maps in the middle of the game are way harder than later, larger maps. Another minor annoyance I have with the difficulty is that enemies can stack, meaning it may look like a single puka is running at you, so you should have time to fire your pump and inflate it, or at least partially inflate it before other enemies arrive, but you don't see the other pukas underneath that immediately kill you once you fired your pump. I would have preferred if enemies couldn't stack, which would have alleviated this problem. Dig Dug Theater is also a thing between certain levels. Don't ask me why or how or who or anything, but it's there. Conveniently, each level starts by showing exactly how many enemies of each type will appear, so counting kills should be as simple as looking at the info screen for each of the 72 levels and adding them up, but unfortunately for my sanity, it's not that simple. You see, if you don't kill the enemies fast enough, they will go into what I'm calling hyper mode, which increases their speed and aggressiveness. If you survive these hyper-aggressive enemies long enough, they will save you the trouble of killing them by voluntarily throwing themselves into the ocean, which means I had to go back and watch my entire playthrough and try to find when enemies jumped in the water. I did my best to remove these kills from the final tally, but I'm sure I missed a few. With that caveat out of the way, in total we killed 297 pukas and 253 figars, bringing the final kill count to 550 enemies. This puts Dig Dug 2 firmly in 11th place out of 25, just behind Mario from Super Mario Bros. 3, and just ahead of the main character from House of the Dead Remake. Dig Dug 2 may be one of the biggest surprises for me. Not in the final kill count, but in how much fun it is to play. The beginning levels were simple enough that even though I didn't understand the mechanics, I was able to enjoy them. By the middle of the game, I was frustrated as the maps got smaller, enemies were more numerous, and I still didn't understand the strategies available to me. Once I leveled up my knowledge, the last 40 levels or so really came together. Watching my gameplay, it's hard to believe that there's much of any real strategy, But once you've played for a little, you really begin to appreciate the design choices, like stunning enemies rather than killing them, or exploiting fault lines to separate enemies from the pack. I could never have beaten this game without rewinds, but I'm glad I persevered, and I highly recommend you give it a try as well. I'll probably never play it again, but here's to hoping Dig Dug 3 is a Nintendo Switch 2 launch title. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.